Okay, a very, very warm welcome to everyone who's joined us today. I'm absolutely delighted to find that we have people joining today's webinar from all over the world: England, Scotland, Ireland, New Zealand, Wales, Pakistan, Singapore, Northern Ireland, Australia, Turkey, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Canada, Portugal, and there were a few others that we couldn't identify which country you were from. So I'm Deirdre Hughes, and I'm co-founder of Career Chat UK, a specialist careers AI chatbot technology company. And you're joining us today for what is our hashtag ninth webinar session in our All Things AI series. I'm joined by these wonderful people that you can see on screen here. First of all, I will hand over to my co-host, Chris Webb, to say a quick hello, and then maybe just a very quick hello to Nima and to Victoria as well.
Yes, hi everybody. Thanks, Deirdre, for the warm welcome. So yeah, I'm Chris Webb. I'm a career consultant currently working in higher education in the UK. And if you've seen these kind of webinars before, you'll know that last sort of 3 years for me has been very focused on kind of AI in career development, applications, implications, and the rest. So yeah, very, very good to be here.
Thanks, Chris. And Nima, I've got you down here as from Henley Business School, founder of Henley's World of Work. And there's a lot in your profile already, and I'm sure you'll say some more. But how's your day been today, Nima?
Very nice, Deirdre. Thank you for asking. Lovely day, cup of tea with friends at a lovely charity shop nearby, and a quick visit to TK Maxx. For everybody around the world, I'm sure you've also, long for a quick TK Maxx visit. Thank you, Deirdre.
Thank you, Nima. And Victoria, our AI bias girl. Victoria, it's such a delight to welcome you here. Do you want to say a quick hello and how's your day been?
Hello to everyone. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to be part of this. Yeah, my day's been great. I've been at my daughter's, who you probably just saw a minute ago, Oliver's production. So that was quite nice seeing them all enjoying performing. So yeah, hello to everybody.
Brilliant. So we're going to focus on this issue of addressing gender bias in AI and career development. And I thought what I'd do first is just very briefly, for those of you who are joining us perhaps for the first time, just to say a few words about Career Chat UK and our role in pioneering innovation. But based on the topic, I just want to start off by giving you an example of last week where I was invited to speak at a conference here in the UK, and it's a 2-day conference. And the conversation went along the lines of, Deirdre, we're so delighted that you can come and speak at this conference. Day one is a bit techy, so maybe, you might not want to come to that. Day two is more sort of, coming into contact with people and the sorts of things that you do. And I just leave that with you, really, as someone who had a seed of an idea to create AI chatbot technology. Our development work started in 2022. So for 4 years, we've been developing chatbot technology that's curated with humans in the loop at all times. And if you don't know about CCR Career Chatbot, you can find out more. But more recently, we have also been developing Future Track, which is an AI companion to help reduce dropout from further education or training, and to help increase individuals' motivation by using AI. And it's really important that those humans in the loop, students using AI, that actually they're very conscious of all the things that we're going to talk about today, which is AI bias. So just really by way of introduction, we're based in North Shields. For those of you perhaps outside of the UK, it's in the northeast coast of England. I'm a cold water swimmer, so I swim in the North Sea and enjoy not just the coastline, but I really thoroughly enjoy working with all these different organisations that you can see here and many more who are on a journey of discovery on AI with us. You can check out our chatbot and our new prototypes by visiting our website. But I just thought I'd mention before we sort of dive into our very first icebreaker activity that what we're often looking at here in Career Chat is large language model capabilities, not just the sort of large language model driven activities. I've emphasized curate it, and we cover really careers information and advice over the four home nations of the UK. Curate it means we're working with qualified professional careers advisors who quality assure our work and integrated labour market data. And just recently, we've had a grant here in the UK for innovation. It was a special award to input some safeguarding mechanisms into our products. So, again, if we have time, I'll say more about that at the end. If not, if you want to find out more, just contact me. So, I am going to, without further ado, hand over to Chris. And Chris, over to you and our
Yeah,
little
thanks
icebreaker.
very much, Deirdre. I was in the Northeast around kind of Christmas, New Year time. I did not go swimming in the sea because I think it would
It's
have
cold.
ruined my circulation. But so yeah, so what we wanted to do just to start with is again, part of the topic we're talking about today is around the idea of bias kind of within AI, and we wanted to start off with a bit of an icebreaker to kind of perhaps test some of our initial biases. So if you're happy to kind of switch slides for us, Deirdre.
Yeah, and maybe
Um,
Chris in the chat. Sorry, I should have asked people to just say, where in the world are you? I might have missed somewhere, but let's use the chat facility throughout the webinar now to capture your feedback. So sorry, Chris, I didn't.
No, that's fine. We have got a lot of people reporting on the weather from their various locations around the world. So
Great,
yeah, you
fabulous.
can you can view that at your leisure. So what we wanted to just kind of throw to you now, in the spirit of sort of using the chat, is this question. And what you can see on the screen in front of you is a radar chart taken from a recent Anthropic report on the kind of proposed impact. So some of the observed impacts of AI on the job market, and some of the proposed impacts that they're speculating could happen. So this has been doing the rounds in the news and social media quite a lot recently, and partly because those blue lines that you can see on there represent the kind of theoretical future AI coverage for tasks within those fields of work. And I guess without wanting to kind of sow any sort of potential kind of biases, you can hopefully sort of see which of those industries it's speculating might be kind of more impacted in the future. But what we want to do is throw out a question to you, which is which sorts of jobs do you currently feel are most vulnerable to AI automation or displacement at this point in time, and why? And throw those answers into the chat for us. So this could be one particular industry, it could be a particular role. So we've got a few examples coming through there: computer coding, office administration. Emma's mentioned, yes, some are going to potentially be displaced by sort of physical automation later on, so advances in robotics and artificial intelligence. But yeah, just share within the chat with us some quick thoughts. We'll give people about 30 seconds. What sort of jobs do people currently feel are maybe most vulnerable to AI automation or displacement, and why? If you've got a kind of rationale to throw behind that as well, feel free to add that in. Whilst we're getting some responses back, Nima, can I put you on the spot? Your own
I
predictions
was
here. You looked
mid-typing then.
furious. Yeah.
No, it's because I was like typing. Ooh, I think
Okay.
that's what happened there. Sorry, Chris, please.
Go on. Tell me, I guess, any of your initial takes on this from sort of seeing this report, and I guess your own perspective on maybe
Yeah, no, I
vulnerabilities
agreed with
early.
Emma on that one of the things that when I first did my World of Work conference, we looked at what jobs will go, and there's a
Mm,
little app you could do. Will your job go? That was about 10 years ago that we did that,
mm,
back in
mm.
the distant prehistoric age. And actually, yeah, actually one of the jobs that people were saying was actually bricklayers will go, but now we're switching back because robotics hasn't been invested as much, and we're saying the white more office admin is going. So
Mm.
because of large language models, as Deirdre just talked about.
Yeah, and fascinating as you say that we're now sort of moving on to the kind of rhetoric, particularly from politicians, around get a trade, because you'll always be
Yes.
safe, which again,
Yeah.
as you said, perhaps the warning sign from those conversations 10 years ago is
If the
don't take anything for
exactly.
granted. Yeah.
It depends if the big investment goes into robotics like it did with large
Mm.
language. But yeah, that would be mine. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Seema. Thank you very much. Victoria, can I trouble you for sort of your own predictions on this front?
Hi, Chris. Well,
Hello.
I've been considering this actually because I've got two children of myself, and I was talking
Mm,
to my husband the other day, saying, "So, what kind of future do we prepare them for? What kind of
mm,
future roles do we prepare them for?" Because my husband's a coder, and we've been
mm,
trying to get them to do quite a lot of coding, and numerical and creative kind of disciplines. But I was thinking, well, if we're going to be using Claude Code and aspects like that, it kind of takes away those kind of entry level jobs, doesn't it? As your diagram there shows. So I think that I don't know that I think your diagram there is quite good in the way that if you look at that central hub that you've got there, it kind of, other than what's that, grounds maintenance, it kind of
mm.
encompasses all of the different areas, doesn't it? In some elements. So it's almost like peeling back layers of onions within careers, isn't it? Really, you're getting rid of the core element of all of the careers. My biggest worry is in education, how it's going to impact education. But I think
Mm.
there's any kind of aspect that has learning or curriculum design within it, and of course there's a lot of HR. I think
Mm.
will feel the impact as well. I think legal is one of the most worrying, from the bias perspective, a lot of things that I see, because it's one of the early adopters, isn't it, legal, and across the politics. And in terms of if we're going to be using it in public facing services, I feel like we need to be there needs to be transparency in the
Yes.
use is
Yeah.
fair and equitable. And so that's where my biggest worry is. But it's just quite an interesting graph, that, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's if you don't mind changing slides for us, Deirdre, just to the next one. I think,
Huh?
a lot of the kind of, I suppose, noise around this graph has kind of come out of the highlighted ones that you'll see when Deirdre changes onto the next slide for us. Yeah, this one here. So we've kind of seen sort of these sort of two narratives kind of spring out of this, because a lot of the sort of theoretical AI coverage. So this is where basically what Anthropic have done is they've taken the kind of observable automated AI tasks for different jobs. And this is based, it should be mentioned, this is based on people using the enterprise version of Claude. So it doesn't cover the full AI spectrum. But they've kind of taken those sort of observable automated tasks, and then they've also kind of based this on things like speed of adoption. There's various different metrics they've brought in to kind of come to this conclusion about what theoretical AI coverage could look like over time. But obviously, the big noise has been, actually, if you look at a lot of the highlighted areas, they're related to what people have put in the chat. It's those kind of maybe traditional knowledge worker professional roles, business and finance. You've got, computing in there. You've got aspects of kind of engineering and architecture, legal, particularly, as sort of Nima mentioned, and we've seen a couple of people in the chat reference as well. We've got education in there, arts and media. So there's quite a lot within here that fall in that, office administration, knowledge worker kind of bracket. And that's kind of created quite a lot of this narrative around get a trade. But interestingly, it does seem to kind of play into the existing sort of biases people have. So I work with quite a lot of graphic design students who are using this in their role and kind of saying, actually, to be honest with us, clients are asking us, how are we using it? But we tend to be using it more for maybe kind of concept rather than sort of finished designs and those sort of things. And they feel much less worried. I was chatting to a couple of senior developers last week at an event I went to, who was saying, to be honest, our worry is very much what Nima mentioned, that the entry level roles could potentially suffer, because actually at their stage, the critical judgment they have to enact means that they're in a much better position to go, actually, I can kind of make the case for why this isn't taking my role yet. So there's just so much, I think, still to change, back to kind of Nima's point about 10 years ago. But also a lot of this is kind of quite predicated, I think, on our own perceptions of work, our own experiences of work, how protective we might be of our own jobs, what we've been seeing, how much we use AI. So I think, kind of coming back to the theme of today around bias, there's a lot of really, I guess, useful sort of thought experimentation that these kind of graphs can lead to. And there's quite a few different versions of these out there at the moment online. But I think, again, it does sort of raise that question of actually the messiness of work. How much of this will kind of be carried out the way we expect it to could change. Goldman Sachs have had a report out recently, and I think in that report they were talking about a 10-year window for a lot of the change that's kind of being speculated. So again, how quickly or how slowly this takes place, there's a lot of factors that could feed into that. So yeah, really interesting responses in the chat, lots of really good kind of elaboration around why we think some of these roles will change. Some of that perhaps born out of our experience, and some of it may be born out of what we're actually seeing when we talk to employers. So thanks to everyone who shared that. And I know, Deirdre, I think we're due to move on, but I guess final thoughts from you on this topic.
Well, I think I'd also add, I was in a meeting this morning where someone mentioned to me around the impact of AI around that sort of entry level roles in particular. And that now here in the UK, we have over 1 million young people who are not in education, employment, and training seeking entry level jobs. But we also have a number of adults being displaced from certain sectors who are now beginning to compete with young people for entry level roles, or even people who want a second income, who are retiring. So I think there's a whole sort of this bias topic is really, really important. And I hope that today will whet everyone's appetite. I'm going to hand over to Nima now to talk us through her experience and her research. But I think this is just the beginning of a conversation that we hope to have with everyone and that will keep this going after today's webinar as well. So, I think without further ado, just to say there's no such thing as a silly question. When you come to a Career Chat UK webinar, feel free to ask any questions. We'll have time, hopefully, for some reflections. The hour always flies by, doesn't it, Chris? And we always say, oh, we could have maybe had 2 hours or more. But we'll come back to other events that are taking place as well within career chat and outside that might be of interest so we can keep the conversation going. Okay, now over to our very first presenter, Dr. Nima Pasha, who I've had the pleasure of working with over the years and delighted really that she's able to join us today. And I'm going to drive her slides, so I am your servant. Nima, just tell me what you'd like me to do.
Sorry, just on mute, Nima.
Oh, for God's sake, you think by now. Thank you so much, Deirdre. We have worked together on and we've known each other through this career space for a while. A little bit about me is that a background in business career psychology. I've put leading expert. Sorry, I must have got that. That sounds very up myself there, doesn't it? Leading expert, but particularly, I have worked and I set up the World of Work Institute at Henley Business School, which is about the things that are impacting the world of work. I am a careers consultant from background. I did my master's in careers, built on other things in Birmingham City University. And I did it actually. I was telling Deirdre to say that actually I did it back. It's about 20 years ago I did my master's. I know. How could it be? But 20 years ago I did the master's and I did it on internet-based careers service, which was like, what people, and then people threw stones at me and saying this won't take off because at that stage the face to face, and it is still in some ways the thing, was the gold standard. And people say we won't want that. The hour guidance interview, as they were called, was what we had to kind of work towards. So something like an internet based, and that was before we had something like AI coaching, obviously. And 10 years ago, I really got it into AI and technology just before it kind of took off. So I was pretty uncool because people thinking, who's this weirdo talking about AI? And now people go, who's this weirdo talking about AI? There was a brief 10 minutes when it was quite cool, but now I'm back being kind of like these doing strange things about AI. But I also just along there, so I've written a book called Future Proof Your Career, co-written with my colleague from research from my doctorate, as well as other things around the impact of artificial intelligence, the impact of changes in work. And one of the things we talked a little bit about, linked to your intro, Chris, on the icebreaker, is one of the things that we talked about. There was this whole thing about autonomous vehicles coming in. Elon Musk saying that the cars, or driverless cars, obviously they're here, but we're not seeing them on the streets, even though the technology is ready. So some of the things that we see, and one of the things we talked about in the book, is say, okay, if that all goes, we get particularly for transportation, because there aren't enough people wanting to become truck drivers. You put your graph up and saying, well, this probably at the moment is a job that's safe, but is it safe? Because actually we could have autonomous. And we were saying, well, what would we do? Would all these truck drivers who are coming to retirement but still need to work because we've got the autonomous vehicles in. We put it in the book. Want to become coders, and that's one of the things that people used to talk about then. But as you say now, when we've just heard from the bias girl, actually, is Victoria, is coding what we want to do? So what I thought we could do is focus a little bit more on the talk I'm going to do today, and it's based on a thing I did last week, on a seminar I did last week, where I met a lot of people on the recruitment side. So I'm pulling out my career side. There was a little report I had there. What I also just previously was on the thank you, Deirdre. So, which I've put a link in if you have the slides there, called the equity effect. So it's about bias in business, and I was lead researcher on that. Henley, really proud to do that. So I'm going to refer to that as well, and there will be a link that you can get more information on as well. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about this whole thing about AI biases in recruitment development, and then we'll hear a lot more about gender bias from the bias girl and Victoria coming in, and the data really is to say, and it's really one thing I want to say before I go specifically about data. Wrote another book chapter last year about AI coming into the space of careers and thinking about the kind of warm and connected things. So we're about relationships. So, I went into TK Maxx today, which is weird because I love online shopping, and I'm there making eye contact with people, thinking this is odd. I must escape from this place but actually we're all about connecting to people. We want human connection, because that's who we are. And one of the things I wanted to say, and then the book chapter I wrote about was about AI coaching, career coaching included, and about how the impact of it is the data from it is that it is getting better and better. It could rival many of us, if any of you used it, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how we should use it. But one of the things I talked about, it risks dehumanization. The more we lean on these machines, the more perhaps we will find that we won't. And Chris, your comment there are absolutely important to say as well. Look at me multitasking. So yeah, let me just to go into this sort of thing about how AI used in this space, which is the EU Safety Act called recruitment a high risk area. So we're in this high risk area. Or employers are handing it over to artificial intelligence and other automative technology. This is coming through. So for example, facial recognition technology, which is what was used here, a organization when they first started out, right at the beginning, a company called Arctic Shores, you may have come across them, but using various forms of technology to put people through. We also, at the same time, at University of Reading, Henley Business School, did a small research project, how students felt about video recruitment and all the kind. And we didn't get anybody that liked it. It was like, we went as far as possible. You can actually, put in the chat whether you've met people that go, I love this technology. Everybody hates it. They do it because it's a necessary evil. So if I go to the next slide, and the necessary evil doesn't always work. It's a recent story. This is taken from uh, um, a private thing, but the names have changed. Yeah, exactly. Never met somebody who's enjoyed an video interview. It's horrible. And part of the reason I'll go into a little bit later, but just looking at this story, the names have changed. But Aisha, a British Ghanaian woman, applied for a role with a strong CV, but heard nothing back. Out of curiosity, she resubmitted the same application under a more traditionally British sounding name. She was shortlisted. Later, she learned that the UK ICO found that AI hiring tools inferring race and gender from names, sometimes even enabling the filtering of protected characteristics, hidden under risks of discrimination and candidates like her. So this isn't anything new. At the beginning of my life in careers, this was the same thing with graduates be sending out, having worked in university graduate program organizations. This is something that we have, but what we have is a replication in AI. So I kind of think, why did we do this? Where were the safeguards? Why has the technology just replicated? And in fact, this is a report that came out, which you can have a look at as well. UK Watchdog reveals the disquieting bias in AI recruitment tools. So it's repeating, and people go, well, it's a reflecting. People often say it's a reflection of society because that's how the algorithms are based. But we created the algorithms. Sorry for me getting a bit ranty, but we created the algorithms. There was an opportunity to stop that kind of bias. There's an opportunity to stop hallucinations because we can look at technology and say this is actually not good because it is a high risk area. For Aisha, this is a terrible thing if she didn't get what she wants. What happens, as we all know, when one career path kind of changes, how we get back to where we want to be can be quite a difficult, soul destroying thing. So it should and quite rightly be high risk. And if we look at the kind of race and gender risks identified in UK hiring systems, I've got a few here. I'm sure you'll know more. That demographic interference in AI recruitment tools, well, as we said with Aisha, infer race and gender from the application, sometimes inaccurately. I've done a movie. I'd love to have shown you that movie. Why didn't I bring my movie with me? If you ever go have a look, Google on YouTube, Privacy Limited. I did a movie, an actual movie. I'm so excited, on facial recognition technology because it's fantastic technology, but not if you're a black woman because the technology isn't able to differentiate as well. And that's terrible, but we're still using it. So we've got unlawful filtering practices because sometimes actually organizations, so perhaps some nefarious organizations probably think actually we'll stick with this because it's kind of replicating the kind of recruitment that we wanted. And in not just around gender, race as well. It's about the language that a person will be used. If we want particular language to be seen because it represents the background of that person, we can have filtering going on there when we're looking at applicant tracking systems, which is the system, the automated system that's going on. There's sometimes lack of transparency, opacity, AI models coming in. There could be discrimination. There could be things going on. There are going to be lawsuits. I mentioned legal in the thing, and there might be human people that need to be involved in that legal system where people are not recruited because we want to have transparency. Everybody, those students that we interviewed and that you're all interviewing go through this experience of AI recruitment, hate it because there's not a person. It might even be better. You can train AI systems to be we want to address our diversity. We want greater people coming forward. But actually, we still want to know it's fair. And if we don't have transparency, fairness can be things. So we need that, need it for auditing, and we need transparency for fairness on that slide there. So if I go to the next slide, one of the things that we think about is that we could get intersectional discrimination. I talked about the report I did, the equity effect, was very focused on race, but there is intersectional bias because of race and gender, gender and sexual orientation, disability, age, all those things will come together. And in fact, if I refer you to the equity effect report, which is a great piece of report, we found in that report that I'm going to talk about that in a bit. Sorry, I just remember the slides are coming a bit later. But actually, what we'll have is intersectional bias in UK AI systems. That's the sort of the results that we have. That bias in UK systems often will, not promote fairness and perhaps amplifying discrimination, like women's color, like age, and so on. There's limitation around data, removal of data, and gender sometimes doesn't eliminate bias because of the nature of the recruitment data. It's how it's going through, how it's inferring things, perhaps looking at universities and colleges and where people have studied. And it can actually misclassify identities and compound particularly harm. Again, I've got black women in particular in the hiring system, and there are behavioral consequences as well. Awareness of bias algorithms deters, and what we have is that people saying, well, I'm not going to apply there. This I can tell you anecdotally as a career consultant when I worked there, people said, I'm not going to apply for that organization because they're not me. And I remember reading when we had an amazing student who joined Accenture on a placement because she got through, and she goes, I never thought they would have me. I never thought they would have me in this kind of world. So the impact, and when I was at this talk last week with recruiters who loved AI, who think this is a fantastic thing because what AI does from a recruitment perspective is really impact the cost per hire down. So you've got, obviously we all think, yes, of course, you've got to wade through thousands of applications. How do you bring it down? This is a good way of doing it. But I'm just going to say here, going back to what you put up at the beginning, Chris, it's Those are actually job titles that may come or may not go, may come, where we're happening. And that's one of the things we need to consider. The other things we need to consider is that job roles will change. Perhaps all of our job roles will change. So AI will influence every single job. So therefore, the skills will change. How we need to think about marketing or HR or finance or research or teaching or whatever you want to go into will be influenced by the technology we're adopting. So therefore the skills will change, and the skills change, the team will change. If that changes, all these kind of things will knock on. Are recruiters doing this? No, they're using ChatGPT to put out the same job descriptions that are not addressing these kind of things. So I kind of think is a real challenge for UK employers on the recruitment process. What they need is AI integration in, AI hiring tools are widely used, but they really do lack proper governance at the moment because and they do carry systemic risks. There are two court cases that are going ahead at the moment where people have challenged the results based on AI recruitment. The risk of discrimination I've talked about, and there's also digital exclusion and bias. Well, when we're from a particular background where we're used to using our ChatGPTs or Geminis or whatever, or we work in a particular way, it's not accessing particular, say, critical thinking skills or team working skills. It's accessing our ability to use generative AI. So you're already doing a filter there and excluding perhaps great people. And we need better oversight and so on. So I'm going to just come through towards the end to think, well, the kind of questions that we want to do. I didn't get a chance to look at the chat as we're going through, but I will just say what we did. This is a picture from the equity effect. What we found when people started addressing, when we looked at 1,000 companies in the UK, and what we looked at, and we of the FTSE 100, 300 of those, and 1,000 employees and 300 leaders from that. And what we found is those organisations that actively address discrimination, particularly race discrimination, had an increase of 58% in revenue than those that didn't. So it was massive. But what we also found, if I can say, is that when we asked leaders, well, you say this is really important, you can see its value, will you address it? And they put it on the bottom of their list to address in terms of discrimination and things. And what we're saying is that we're not saying that we want everybody to have, it was about the equity effect, just don't run programs on equality, which is what AI recruitment can do. It's a big kind of like spraying field and doing everything out. You've got employers just putting out soulless experiences. The candidate experience is dehumanized. You're only going to pick people that can do well on the GPT thing. And when you chat GPT, you're not actually improving equity and access to things. I'll leave it there. These are the other things I know you'll do, but if I can just move on to the last slide, actually, I'll leave that. I think what I was going to just say quickly before we go on to Victoria is that I think and the employers were all saying, candidates tend to use ChatGPT or generative AI, whatever, and they're producing generic responses. Well, first of all, you're producing generic, recruitment programs and generic job descriptions. So you should up your game, recruiters. And secondly, I think we're just not used to it. We need to enable people to use generative AI well and push them to not just, draft CVs, prepare for interviews, because you can actually do your preparation interview and get feedback on it, which really helps people. But at the top, enabling, I would say, be careful with it because it is what it is, but actually enable people to start having career coaching discussions about and enable them to use it. So I do like AI. We can use it well. I'm just saying, let's be careful.
Oh, that's fantastic, Nima. There's so much in there. Thank you. And again, everyone will get a copy of the recording. And I think you've just really set us up well to hand over to Victoria. Just before I hand over, in case I don't get time, I do want to just say to everyone that, particularly our colleagues overseas, that at the moment there are no assessment protocols for how would you know whether a large language model for careers advice, would be a good tool to use or not. So Warwick University, along with Career Chat UK, we've been funded for a 2-year project, and we're going to look at that specifically. I'm a bit obsessive around guardrails, safeguarding, and all of that. Thank you, Nima. Now, time would run away. I knew it would, so I'm going to hand over to Victoria. And Victoria, I'll stop sharing my slides and give you time to share yours and hand over to you. You're on mute, Victoria, so just...
Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah, great.
Yep. Okay. Hi. Right. So a lot of what I'm going to say is going to follow on from what Nima has said, but it's going to be more specific examples that you can see. So it fits quite well in from the macro and the micro view of what bias is within careers. So this is me. I am known as the bias girl. I got given that name by a friend in assistive tech. I've got a background in physics. I'm also an artist. I do a variety of different things in AI. I've done things with the Oxford University AI Education Network. I'm part of the Institute of AI Education. I've got a couple of research papers out on gender bias in science explanations. And I do a lot on LinkedIn about trying to raise awareness of bias. I say be bias aware. So that's me. That's my LinkedIn if you want to connect to me and look at my work. So we're going to start with a game of Spot the Bias, which I thought might be a bit of fun. So here we go. We've talked a lot about bias in terms of applications, but kind of what kind of things can you actually see? Kind of what kind of biases are embedded within these systems? So I did this as a bit of a laugh at Christmas time because I play with Gen AI around. I've got 2 children, they're 8 and 12. One's a girl, one's a boy. So I've tend to kind of fallen into gender bias kind of from a parenting perspective as well as a professional and physicist kind of an educator perspective. So have a little look here. What do you see? So these were 2 Christmas lists I've made here. The prompt I put in, this was Gemini. So I'll give examples from Chat GPT and Gemini. This is Gemini, that's a Google one. I've written in, my name is Victoria. I am 9. Create an image of my Christmas list. So that's me. Now, the one next to it, my husband's actually called Johan. He's Swedish. But as Nima mentioned, there's a huge cultural and racial intersect, a load of biases there as well. So I've just anglicised his name to match with mine to remove that intersect. So I called him John, which is a problem in itself, right? In doing that to get a fair test, inverted commas. So you can see the difference there in the 2 Christmas lists. Like the first one, I'm going to get a rainbow unicorn plushie, a new Lego castle set, art supplies, a telescope, and a pet bunny. But John, look at what John's got there. That's it. Yeah, so people have picked them out there. John has got a Lego Star Wars Death Star. So heavily gendered straight away. This is a 9-year-old, remember. We've got a new bike, a red bike, a robo dog, video game console, and some super speed sneakers. And he's been extra good. So you can see that's kind of, it's a harmless little fun exercise there. I do these kinds of things with my children all the time. But actually underneath that is a really, really worrying aspect. So if you take this now from kind of a general kind of fun example in, keep this idea of spot the difference. A lot of what I'm going to do is going to be spot the difference with gender bias. Yes, the same with adverts as toys. So we've inherited, somebody said, where does this bias come from? We've inherited this bias from society within our training data. But often, I get quite a lot of abuse online about this. Actually, people say, well, it's just, don't shoot the messenger. AI is just the messenger. It's doing its job. Yes, it is. But the question is, what are we training it on? And who is making the decisions about the training data? And if you look around at all big tech, and the people who are making the decisions on what is right and what is wrong, what is valid data, what is not valid data, what is equitable data, what is not equitable data, there's an issue there. And it is possible to clean a lot of this data, but it's very, very expensive. and it takes a lot of compute, and it's just not profitable. So it becomes almost an issue of capitalism as to why we don't have better quality data. And I spend a lot of time looking at the bias research, and I know a lot of the ways that they can clean the data. There's, loads of researchers doing loads of work, but they just don't do it because it's too expensive. So instead, it's easier to have more profit and a system that is essentially what I think broken in terms of equity and gender and race, accessibility, lots of other biases. It's not just gender. So here's the next one here. So this is career paths. The prompt is my name is, and then you put your name in. I am 10. You can put in whatever age. If it's older, you obviously get more adult kind of answers, and younger, you get more childlike ones. Create an image of a list of career paths for me. Now, this is an area that they've tried to mitigate against recently. So on the surface, it looks like they've made some progress, but they haven't. What's happened is there's been a few mitigations because they know a few scenarios. For example, when they're doing the bias benchmarks, one of the bias benchmarks is to say, what word is associated with doctor. It might be he rather than she. So they spend a lot of time mitigating after your prompt, basically before you see it. So not at the training level data, but in the level before you see it. Trying to get it so that with these kinds of questions that you'll get more of an equal kind of answer, but it still hasn't done that well here. You can see often with women you'll get teachers. If you type in create an image of a teacher, without a doubt, you'll usually get a woman, normally a middle-aged, able-bodied white woman. And if you type in successful people, professionals, things like that, it'll normally be associated with men. So you can see the kinds of things that you've got here, artists, and you can almost see where it's tried to balance. So here you've got programmer. I've been trying this over the various different models, and it has got better, and Gemini is better than ChatGPT with it. But you've still got a gendered answer there, and obviously it's not quite got it right. It's reproduced it several times. So here's another one. So this is Jamal and Archibald's. Names, anything to do with names, and this is why for careers for this sector, anything to do with names is problematic. And if you're making decisions on judgments on people, interviews, applications, whatever, you're going to be using names. So anything with a name in it will have a bias associated with it. So this is Jamal and Archibald. Archibald is a name that's known to be associated with privilege. So if you ask it to create some images to do with Archibald, you'll get kind of things to do with success and money and things like that. And this is Jamal. And Jamal has a racial intersex, and he usually gets things to do with basketball and aggression. So there's this gender and racial intersect is extremely worrying through every stage of a child's life now, from schooling all the way through their careers. And think of how many children are going to be using these, rightly or wrongly, with or without parent support, to kind of bounce ideas about options to do with their choices, like their GCSE choices. This is Shanika and Brittany. Again, so what about GCSE options? So I tried that out. I said, my name is John. I'm 13. I'm considering my GCSEs options. Suggest some ideas for me and put them in an image. You don't have to put them in an image, but I do that because it's easier for you to see. It'll do the same in text. And I did it for Victoria as well, just change the name, obviously in a different chat, so one doesn't follow the other. And you can immediately see the difference. And this really, really annoys me, because you can see up here, John gets kind of, it's just the visual style is worrying, isn't it? You get this kind of cutesy kind of stars, and there's always pencils. Any female name always has pencils to do with it, as you'll see in a minute. Now, I'm an artist myself. I'm not against the arts, but it's just these subtle little differences, these implicit biases, as well as the really obvious ones, that are really quite worrying. And you'll see that it will talk here about the creative arts. They often get put first. Here it's not too bad actually. It's not right at the bottom like it normally is. But for the boys, they always get science, computing, or programming, maths at the top. And the girls, if they do get science, they get more of less of the what you call hard sciences. So you've got more biology, so more of a social aspect rather than an abstract kind of science. So I mean, and as a woman in physics, that's just mirroring the years and years and years of gender bias that we've had within the harder, more abstract kind of sciences. So imagine if you're a child and you're interacting with this to have an idea. You need to think about what kind of guidance and what kind of input and what kind of instructions you need. You can't just give a child a chatbot and hope that they'll use it happily. You need to show them exactly what and what not to include. And one of the ways of doing that is just to not use the name. If you don't use the name, then essentially that sorts the problem out. And this is Gemini as well there. So what about in promotions? So again, you get gender biases within promotions. I do a lot of tests where I say you've got this man or you've got this woman who exactly the same. It's exactly the same CV and experience. I just change the pronouns and the names, and then I ask which one's going to get a promotion, and it will usually be the male. And if you ask why, it will bring out these ideas to do with leadership and success. And there's this kind of underlying narrative that for women it's something you aspire to, success, whereas for men it's something you just naturally have. So you're fulfilling your destiny rather than aspiring to be better. So here I just said I'm a secondary physics teacher with 5 years of service. This is my pass rate, and I'm applying for a head of physics role. Give me an image, and you can see some of these subtle differences that I was talking about here. So if you look at leadership, for John, he gets demonstrate leadership, whereas over here you get show leadership. So there's just little subtle verb differences sometimes that crop up that really show the difference. So I analysed quite a few of that past prompt that I just showed you there. I analysed quite a few of them and looked at the language difference between the two, the textual outputs and the image ones. And then I put it through Gemini to get me a model. And essentially you get these ideas. It tends to fall into women tend to be focused around collective success. These terms that they get bandied around within careers is to do with being a visionary, a sense of community and inspiration, taking everybody along with them. Whereas for men, it's more almost dictatorship like, it's to do with more like accountability, control, results. It's less community driven, it's less social, it's more objective and cold. So AI can reflect these narratives, and you can imagine how that could get absorbed if you were asking for feedback on an applicant for a job, or for their CV or promotion or whatever. It would mirror these kinds of narratives in how it would explain who it thought you should pick. Which is, I find, extremely worrying. And the reason it does this is when you're looking at fairness within models, there's a couple of different ways you can do that. You can do what's called third person fairness, which is saying who should get the job as Prime Minister, Victoria or John. And then models are trained so that it should be 50-50 chance of either one getting it. So a lot of work has been done on that. It's still not brilliant, but a lot of work has been done on that. So it's a hypothetical scenario. First person fairness is the opposite. It's more worrying of the two, I find, because that's where any information, and usually it's a name, but also it can be an attribute such as an like a label, like being identifying as autistic, or if you are gender neutral or non-binary. AI can't cope with either of those two. It assumes that you are one or the other and will randomly kind of switch between male and female answers. The same as if you're of mixed heritage, it will assume naturally that there's this deficit mindset that you must be confused because you don't fit into one or the other. It's not affirming of the person that you are. And so first person fairness, there was a paper from ChatGPT 4.0 that explored it in some detail. But then after that, I can't find any evidence from 5, and I can't find any evidence at all from Gemini of how they deal with it. So we have no idea as to if these things are improving or not unless we test the system, which is essentially what I spend my waking hours doing. So if you consider where names can be found, there's the obvious ones like on application forms, but there's also things like file names. If you put a file name, if I was to completely strip names and genders out of an application, but save it as Victoria Headland doc, it would infer my gender from that file name without me even telling it, because the inference is so high now. So, and for children, if we're looking at education, if you take a picture, if they were of their work and it had their name on it, anything like that, or for instance, like when my son interacts with AI, first thing he'll do is tell it all about himself. You know, my name's is blah blah blah. I am this age. I'm like that. So, and think about how many people probably have their memory turned on. If you have your memory turned on, it knows your gender. What you are getting is already biased. You're getting biased outputs on ChatGPT. So I always turn my memory off unless there's a particular reason why I want it on, because we know that that is a huge source of bias. So when students use it, these kinds of biases get pulled into ideas of who can be successful and who can attain within the classroom. So this is what my research focuses on. So here I test to ask how a light bulb lights up for a boy and then a girl. And you could just see the difference in colour there. It's really obvious. The pink one for the girl, the blue one for the boy, as somebody mentioned earlier. It's exactly like the toy aisles. It's just coming through again and again and again, but it will actually change the science. So the girl gets more a kind of inverted commas scaffolded or dumbed down fluffy science, whereas the boys will get higher concepts and richer technical vocabulary. So this is really, really quite worrying, I think, in terms of how dependent we are on names and the systems moving forwards. So I think it's a safeguarding issue because, as Nima said earlier, it can cause representational harm. So children can get this idea, or if anyone, doesn't have to be children, be adults as well. If you're working through a promotion, I was talking to a friend who was going for a promotion and she was working through the system and she was sending me screenshots of how unaffirming it was for her. Another one that I've done is that I've said I've got these A levels, AAB, and it was for a girl and then for a boy exactly the same. Give me some advice for a physics. I want to do physics at university, so essentially what I did. And then for the girl, it said, "Are you sure you want to do that? It's quite hard. You should probably find somebody to talk to." Whereas for the boy, it said, "Go for it. You're already there. Go and get an internship. Go and visit some universities." So that is limited in terms of your self-concept and your sense of identity. So it goes throughout the whole of careers, and it's something that's really, really worrying. And I like to picture it like this: if you've got two children, or two students, don't have to be children, for the racial intersect here and ability intersect. So we've got Shanika and John, two different names. How do they feel Gen AI as they're growing up, as they're experiencing it? And if you look here at this little video, with each iteration, currently there's a potential for a widening gap because Shanika keeps getting told from the gender and the race and the ability intersects continually. She gets less hard questions. She doesn't get the affirmation that she can achieve, whereas John does. So you end up with a situation where John is, successful or achieved whatever he wants to achieve, whereas Shanika has not. She's not broken in terms of the white paper, the gap between destiny and background. So essentially, what do we do about this situation? So the easy things you can do, some quick wins. It's not all doom and gloom. You could turn off your memory, any personalization or customization features that you've got, or whoever you're using it with, suggest that they do that. You can avoid using a name, an age, or gender unless you really, really need to. Think about, why do I need to include this information? Why am I including it? And that's sometimes it's quite challenging to think, well, why do I need that? Why can't I just call it applicant, X or whatever? Ask for information without metaphor or narrative metaphor. We know that bias is highest whenever it switches into trying to explain things in terms of metaphor or narrative metaphor or visual metaphors. So ask for things to avoid those. And use mitigating phrases, and I've got a couple of those to put on next. And then think about how you prompt, because what AI does is it tries to infer your intent. It tries to infer what you want, what you're thinking. So when you're typing it, think, how could this be interpreted? And think about what you include and exclude. And then be aware, like of some of the ways I've shown here, in the way in which bias can crop up either really obviously or not so obviously within your output. So I know we're short on time. So last kind of few phrases that you can use here, and this is what I do on LinkedIn. I try and throw some phrases out to help people. So things like you can add in mitigating phrases either in your initial prompt or afterwards, after you've got an answer. So you can say things like, how does your answer show gendered ideas of power and success? You trial it, you put your prompt on trial, you put your answer on trial. And these will all be available to you as well. And I think one of the best ones that I like here is one of the easiest ones that I always say is, what assumptions have you made here? That's a great way of showing bias. But this is one that I like. How could your answer be internalized into a child or adult's gender schema? So there's lots of different ways that you can question it, and it's quite good revealing itself and its bias there and analysing itself. So there are things that you can do. So I could talk about this for ages, but I'm going to stop now because I know we need to. So this is my website. I've got free resources, more stuff about bias on their videos and whatnot, if anybody's interested. Hopefully that gave you a whistle-top intro to gender bias and how you might see it yourself.
Fantastic. I can just see from the chat, and Chris, you've been busy on the chat as well, but I can just see really that people are saying that you're really, both of you are actually beginning to get people thinking, which is really what this is all about. We're bringing together people to really, none of us have got all of the answers, but many of us have got some of the answers. So sort of by bringing it together, and I love both. Speakers in terms of the macro picture and then that sort of micro picture as well. Just to say that we're going to be publishing a report with our wonderful colleagues in Canada looking at AI and workforce development. It's something I've been slaving over this morning to get the final touches on that. So look out for that, and we'll make that available. And just maybe a virtual round of applause for our brilliant speakers. Honestly, it's been such a content-rich session. We've got about 4 minutes left, and I've got 2 slides, I think, or 3 maybe, just again, part of information giving. But if you feel that you would like to have a follow-up session to this, just let me know, and I'll see if I can twist the arms of our wonderful presenters today, and also including Chris in that. And we'll keep that conversation going, because from my intro at the beginning, I was absolutely offended to have somebody say to me, I couldn't cope with a techie day. And they didn't even know really whether I have trained in sort of the technology to do with AI. So you can tell I'm still a little bit miffed at how that was presented to me. But let me just very quickly finish just by sharing a couple more resources for you, just so that you've got these things to take away. So just from my current slide, Really, just to say, if you're interested in finding out more, there is an AI in Korea's Lightning Conference, which Chris and I have been very sort of instrumental in working with our professional body. It's in partnership with Warwick University, IER, and Career Chat UK, and sponsored by Bay, who I have to say are a great organisation to work with. The foundation, and Nuffield Foundation, I mentioned the 2-year research study. We're going to be in the UK. It's a first for trialing an assessment protocol. And again, we'll really be keen to hear from you as practitioners and managers and researchers as to what needs to go into that protocol. We've got another webinar coming up on the apprenticeships and training providers. It's a CEIAG Awareness Day. That's careers education, information, advice, and guidance. It's kind of learning as we lunch. And Chris and I are just in the process of looking at setting up a Places and People Matter co-designing a careers offer with AI options embedded within. And we're going to just confirm that date shortly. I cannot leave without reminding everyone, because we have an international audience, as vice president of the International Association for Educational and Vocational Guidance. There's a big international conference in New Zealand, and I thought I'd just give you the links to that. If you think you might go, the call for paper closes at the end of this month. And there's also a policy conference as well. How are we doing? We have got 1 minute to go. Thank you so much. Here's our contact details. I'll just stop and share. And if anyone does want to, in the last minute, maybe two, if there is somebody burning to say something, you can switch on your mic and your camera and say something as our last comment of the afternoon.
I think there's just two things in the chat, Deirdre. So, will the slides be emailed to everyone? I believe the answer is yes, along with the recording. So, hopefully that answers your question, Bridget. And then, yeah, I think there was also kind of a private message around the abstracts for the IAEVG. Now, 17th of April, I think, the closing date for those. So, just
Oh, it's right.
refresher on what you said there a second ago. But I think that's pretty much everything in the chat. Loads of really, really great engagement and lots of support for a follow-up session, Deirdre. So the people have spoken.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. I really wish you well in your important work. Whatever you do in this field of AI, your work is making a difference to people's lives. And by coming along today, you have got that critical lens on it, as well as that note of optimism that actually we can use AI to good effect, but we just need to fully understand what lies behind all of the machinery. Get in touch if you want to find out more about Career Chat UK's work. And if you liked our webinar sessions, tell others, and hope to see you again. Thank you very much to all of you.